I'm very pleased to introduce Ofra Yeshua-Lyth, who's going to be speaking about her new book, which, as you can see, is called The Case for a Secular New Jerusalem. And what's left out here is a memoir. So you'll have to fix your PowerPoint there. She's from Israel. She worked at Ma'ariv, which was a very big Israeli paper, as a journalist, a correspondent in Germany and in the United States. And she now says Ma'ariv is no more, and I don't know about that, so she'll have to explain that to you. She translated Israel Shachak's book, A Jewish Religion, The Weight of 3,000 Years, that's the approximate title, into Hebrew. Now that sounds really weird, and I had no idea. I assumed it started off in Hebrew and got translated into English, but his books, it doesn't work that way. His books were in English. And just a few years ago, she got that book finally to where the Hebrew readers can read it. And I'm sure she'll tell you a little bit more about that. We did some interviews beforehand. You may have heard the one I did that was just audio, and it's still up on our website. And then just a couple days ago, we did one that was video, and talking about certain court decisions that, well, we named the video, You Can't Be an Israeli. And that no one can be an Israeli in terms of nationality. And if she doesn't get into that in her talk, she will. Okay, so, well, without further introduction then, and the last thing is we have in the back of the room books for sale, some of our books that we've had for a while, some good leaflets, and there'll be some opportunity afterwards for you to meet her personally and for her to sign the books. And we're selling them for $10, heavily subsidized, because we want all these books to go. Ofra Yeshua-Lyth.
Thank you very much, Stanley, and thanks everybody who came this rainy evening. I think there are a couple of points. You talked about Shachak. I not only translated him, I also published him, because like my own book, it didn't find a publisher. This is what happened. And in a way, I was closing a circle, because in 1972 to 75, Shachak himself published and financed the publishing of the memoirs of Fawzi al-Asmar, a very dear friend of mine who passed away last year. He was a Palestinian journalist, and he wrote a book, a seminal book, which I quote in my book. It's called To Be an Arab in Israel. So if you can imagine, this Palestinian wrote this book. Israel Shachak, a professor of chemistry with some very forceful views, published it. I never met Israel Shachak, but in my political affiliations, I am very close to the people who were his best friends, and together we did this. I just read the book on a flight to the United States in 2010. That was long after I published my book. In a way, I'm glad I didn't read him before, because although we come to the same conclusions about Israeli society and the way the Jewish religion influences Zionism, I only looked at it from a secular point of view, not from inside the Jewish religion. And he came with a completely different knowledge. He was educated as a yeshiva person. He went to a kibbutz, which was religious. So he really knew all the ins and outs, which I never got into. So in a way, my book is a completely different thing. And I'll go back to the book now. Most of my talk will not be about what the book is all about, but the political situation that Israel finds itself in. But I still want to tell you the history of the publication of the book, because it also sheds some light about the Israeli. I called my book A State of Mind. This was the original title in 2001 when I was thinking of writing it. And I could never find a publisher. The Israeli book agents that dealt with literature said they don't want to do any, that we are, you know, book agents that just avoid you. And then a British book agent told me, it's well written, but I don't know if there is anything new in it politically. So I thought, okay, I'll publish it in Hebrew and get some reactions, and then you'll see that it's a new thing that people didn't hear about. I published it in 2004, didn't find an Israeli publisher either, published it with a small publisher that I financed myself, and I didn't get a single review for about a year. And then a very important Israeli literature person, Aharon Amir, is an Israel Prize laureate, somebody who had a literary quarterly, very highly esteemed man, liked the book very much, wrote to me, and he wrote a review, which I was very pleased with. And I will read to you, because I'm using his review as an introduction to the English edition, also to the Hebrew second edition. I'll just read 2 lines of it. He said, first he said it's a good book, etc. Those who do indeed read to the end will understand why, over a full year elapsed from the time of the book's publication, before anyone could be found to relate to it, either in any of the electronic or written media. He's relating to himself. You know, I'm the first person writing about it. Those reading to the end of the book will agree with me, at least in their heart of hearts, that there is little chance of finding writers from any of the media in Israel who will seek out the book Eretz Brit in the wake of the review published here and discuss its narrative. Now, the review was supposed to be published where Aharon Amir wrote all his reviews, but it was never published. So it stayed an unpublished review. We put it on a website. Aharon had his own website eventually when it didn't go to, I wouldn't name the publication that it had to go, the very important book review in Israel. And then I purchased a page in Haaretz literary book review, and I published this review at the time. And then they stopped commissioning book reviews for me. Surprise, surprise. Now the editor changed, so I can write reviews there again. So this is about the book, and I called it A State of Mind at the time in English. My good friend Hassan Fauda and other people thought that it did not sound enough Israeli-Palestinian, that I had to change it. So when I eventually decided to publish it, I translated the book again in 2006. Found no publisher, had a book agent in New York who did a very good job, and he said, listen, Ofra, nobody would want to touch it, not because they don't like it, but because they don't want to be penalized by the people who don't like it. So apparently Amazon has a service for self-publications, and I was able to afford it. It's quite affordable for would-be writers, and they did a good job, and I'm very happy the book is here before you. And this is about the book, but I would now want to show you a presentation, and the book is all about stories. It's a memoir. I tell family history, but I want to make a point. And the truth is, I wanted originally to write a political novel, but through thinking about it, I realized I couldn't explain how Israelis think and operate, and why they operate why they cooperate with the society they're in. And I got into so many explanations that I thought it's much better to write real life stories, and the explanations, what happens there. But let me go to these days. And last year there was, how do I go that? Right. Last year the Israeli Supreme Court unanimously rejected a plea by a group of Israelis, and I was one of these Israelis. There were Jews amongst us, Arabs, Druze, etc. We wanted to be Israeli nationals. As Stanley mentioned before, there is no such thing as Israeli nationality, and we thought it was about time after 65 years of the state. The court action started actually in 98. I only joined them in 2005. You will find there people like Uri Avneri, who you might know about, sort of left-wing Zionists, as well as Professor Uzi Ornan, and I'll get back to him. He's 91 years old today. He was in his 70s when he started this work. This was our Ani Israeli Association, a terrible brand name, because no Palestinians want to join us now, because who wants to be called Israeli anyway? But the court action, I think, is important. And the court's decision was there is no Israeli nationality, which we expected, but we knew that for 15 years they avoided us. They did not want to say it out loud because although the practice is that there is discrimination in Israel, and the Knesset makes anti-non-Jewish nationals, the court, the Supreme Court, was still is considered a bastion of Israeli liberalism, somebody who stands up for democracy, but they had no choice because this is the truth. And I would tell you that we told them, listen, every one of us carry an Israeli passport, and this is my Israeli passport, and it says nationality Israeli. This is how I travel. This is how every Israeli travel in the world, whether he's Jewish or not Jewish. Palestinians who are Israeli citizens have the same kind of passport. But, however, this passport is only our travel document. For internal purposes, we need to carry an ID, which is our identity card. And this is compulsory in Israel. Everybody carries one. And the identity card actually tells what our ethnic or religious origins are. And during this court action, we made the state reluctantly, the judge forced them to say which nationalities does the Israeli state recognizes. There are about 125 nationalities. You can be Israeli citizen and carry an ID which says you're a British national or a Persian national or unclear nationality. This is recognized, but no Israeli nationality. And the thing is, and the reason and the rationale behind it is that Jewish nationality is something special, because this is supposed to be the Jewish state, and Jews get a different treatment, and I'll go to that. This is my ID. Israelis will tell you that today, I marked it in red, the nationality is not marked. You see asterisks. Since 2002, and some of you know about the situation with the different Jewish denominations, Reform, Orthodox, or Conservative, and because the Reform and Conservatives are not recognized in Israel, and the Orthodox is the only Judaism recognized in our state. Will I have some water here? Sorry, I didn't bring any with me. Then instead of, I had it, my old ID said here Jewish, now there are asterisks, nothing else. However, if you're an official of the state or a policeman, you can easily know that I'm Jewish just by looking at this. And it doesn't say so. It says, I don't know if you have any Hebrew readers, it says my name, the name of my father Moshe, the name of my mother, and my date of birth, which is in somewhere in the kind of dates that you're used to, and also in Hebrew, Kaf B'Tevet, that means the Hebrew calendar. So of course, only because I'm Jewish, only Jewish people have the Jewish calendar marked on their IDs, but that's not all. I only have my mother and my father. If you're an Arab, if you're a non-Jew, you also have a grandfather. Guess what? You have a special place where the name of your grandfather is marked, and this helps because you might have a name which is sound Israelite, like Yosef or Yusuf or Amir, but the third generation will find your Abdallah or Muhammad and will know that you're not one of us. And that's the whole point, and this is actually the whole thing we have to deal with. Another thing I have to tell you, most of my talk is not about the occupation. I'm not talking about the occupation. I'm not talking about what happened after 1967. We are talking about the good old Israel that the two-staters want to go back to. And this is the state we have. And when people say, we want 2 states, I say, well, we could have 8 states. But why do we want this state which discriminates on the basis of ethnic origins and the religion of its citizens from day one? So this I already explained, the nationality is written, and the discrimination always been recognized by the state, and now the legislators joined the executive branch and the legislative branch. And are we allowed to call it apartheid? How many times did you hear Israelis say there is no apartheid in Israel? Because there are no special buses. Surprise, this month, buses are coming back. You can go to Mondovais and read my articles about bus 286 when they Arabs are not allowed to go on, and then they change, and then they change. And my friends, these very days are starting a new action because there is another, the petty apartheid is back. There is a little bit of petty apartheid in Israel. It's true that unlike South Africa, we don't have bathrooms for Jews and for Arabs. But the discrimination is there, and our apartheid is just a generic name. It's like when I was a child, every refrigerator was called a frigidaire, even if it was General Electric. So it's discrimination, it's apartheid, it's just a question of a name. Also important to say that on most, the laws that the Knesset is passing, the laws that we are subjected to, normally don't say there are special rights for Jews. Oh no. What we have, we simply have two kinds of citizenship. One citizenship is citizenship by the right of return, like I was born in Israel, but I'm a citizen by right of return. And if you're not eligible to the law of return, you are a citizen by right of residency. And there is a very big difference. And somewhere you will find that the law of return refers to Jews. So the state and the Knesset can continue to legislate, and institutions just speak about law of return or residency, and that's all. They don't talk about the religion, but it's there in the back. So as I said, it's a euphemism for Jewish origins. And this is the privileges that you get if you are eligible for the right of return. You have a right to come to the country, to enter any time into the country. You have the right to reside. You can leave the country for a long time. You can come back because you're eligible to the right of return. I've been away for 10 years. I came back. I had a child abroad, and the husband wasn't even Jewish, but never mind. We came back. We were all eligible by the right of return. Family reunion. Any Israeli Jew can bring their families with them. Any Jew living abroad coming with the right of return can bring their children, their grandchildren, their grandmothers. You know, it goes 3 generations removed. You're still eligible for the right of return. Happy families. And access to your own property is obvious. If you are eligible for the right of return, you can buy 93% of the land of Israel is designated to the Jewish National Fund. It's Jewish National Fund. So if you're a citizen by right of return, you're eligible to all these rights. But when you give privileges to one sector of the population, that means that the people who do not have are not citizens by right of return, citizenships based on residency, they do not have this all these rights. So they do not have rights to their property, even though, and I'll go back to this absent property situation. They cannot buy land which is owned by the Jewish National Fund. They cannot unite families. They cannot bring, and if they leave the country for a certain number of years and their passport is no longer valid, it's a big problem to renew it. You have to go through commissions, you have to prove, you have to do this, and sometimes you are asked to do all kind of favors to the state so that it will reinstate you as an Israeli citizen. Okay. Altogether, I only mentioned 3 realms that have 3 areas, but the Adala organization and the lawyers found that there are 55 Israeli laws, little laws, big laws, that are discriminative against anybody who is not Jewish. And I remind you again, we're talking about proper Israel, which will be the one state, one Jewish state, when we have one Palestinian state and one Jewish state. And of course, and we do have Israeli citizens who are not Jewish, but that can vote to the Knesset. But see how limited their rights are. They can vote to the Knesset only if they go with a list which accepts, that's another one of these laws, if they only campaign that the platform recognize a Jewish and democratic state. I just wanted to go back into history because all the situation with the property and where these things started, and I'm sure every one of you is campaigning for Palestinian rights, is very often meeting. They don't come to my talks anymore, but you meet some supporters of Israel that have their own claims, like, there was a war, and the Palestinians didn't want us, and they didn't want a Jewish state, and we had to fight, and we had. So this is some family memoirs about this war. The yellow part in this map, this is a map of Tel Aviv. I mean, it's not a very good map, but it's Tel Aviv. I don't know if you know it. There is a sea. Jaffa is in the south. Tel Aviv is in the north. And the yellow part is a neighborhood which is called Manshia. It's on the border of Tel Aviv and Jaffa, quite an old neighborhood. The people who live in Manshia originally, this is what it looks like today. It was poor Arab Jews, Jews of Yemenite mainly. It was even called Yemenite Vineyard. But also on the south of Manshia, you found more Arab families, but basically it was a mixed neighborhood. Most landowners lived in Jaffa. And then the war started. Most of us were not born then, but history is there. In the year, when was it? Maybe 2005, I don't remember, there was an exhibition in Tel Aviv. And it just so happened that a week earlier, I read an interview with Amos Oz, a very important Israeli writer. And he explained his adherence to Zionism because in his memoirs, in his childhood in Jerusalem, he remembered the Nakba, the independence, the War of Independence, after the Partition War. He said Arab activists marked their house as a Jewish house, and he knew that if the Arabs had won the war, they would have taken over his house and chased his family away. This is an exhibition of an Israeli photographer who was active at the time, just a press photographer. And it was in Tel Aviv, in a nice place. And suddenly I see these pictures, and I'll tell you in a minute what's written on them. Rudy Weissenstein was the photographer, and he had pictures of the riots after the decision of the partition war. And this says over there, you can see graffiti, it says Bait Aravi, an Arab house, but it's written in Hebrew. And this graffiti says Bait Yehudi v'rechusho, a Jewish home and Jewish property. So this is 1947. And I believe that there were Arab rioters, but there were also Jewish rioters. And people marked houses, and the hostilities were absolutely not one-sided. And you probably heard Ilan Papi. I don't want to start, I'm not an expert on ethnic cleansing, but you can see that it was premeditated, not from one side, but certainly also from the Jewish side. So what happened in Manshia? The women and other members of the Jewish families, the Arab Jewish families, the poor people, they fled because they were fighting. This was a time of war. You can see now all over the Middle East, Christians fighting Muslims, Muslims fighting other Muslims. Ordinary people just ran away and escaped. After the fighting was over, all these families returned to their homes. Also, the Arab families, the women and the other and the children, also fled. Very often you hear Zionists say, "What do you mean? We didn't chase them away. They ran away." True, they ran away. So what? But they wanted to come back. And what happened when they wanted to come back? They weren't allowed to come back because they were not Jewish. Okay? And I put the picture of this woman who actually didn't escape because she was a brave woman, and she said, "If my children are fighting, I'm staying at home." And it is my grandmother. She is a Yemenite woman. She couldn't read or write, but she was a lovely woman. I have lots of stories about her in my book. And all her Jewish neighbors came back. She stayed there. And everybody admired her for it, but all her Arab neighbors never came back. And I remember as a child, it was always surprising. She always said, before the occupation, after the occupation. Nobody else called 1948 the occupation, except my grandmother. In 1950, the absentee property law says, so of course, the Arabs who wanted to come back were not allowed, but in 1950 it became also a law. And listen to the way this law is drafted. Who is not allowed to come back? People who stayed in areas that were held by forces that wanted to fight the state of Israel, or that intended to prevent the establishing of the state of Israel. So this is it. It doesn't say Arabs cannot come back, okay? But I can guarantee you that none of the neighbors of my grandmother was asked whether they went to an area held by forces that did not like Israel. But why was this law in 1950? That's important to remember. Why not in 49? Why not in 48? All right, not because there was a war, because Israel wanted to be a member of the United Nations. And it is against the regulation. The United Nations resolution did not allow Israel to prevent people from coming back. But Israel was obsessed with the idea of having a Jewish majority, an obsession which is only growing. This is the Israeli paranoia. And on one hand, Arab Palestinians were not allowed back into their homes, and on the other hand, a massive movement to import Jews from Arab countries. Arab Jews started, and the state invested a lot in it, and they created new problems, of course, demographic problems for immigrants who really didn't know what they were doing. And unfortunately, although they were, I go into it in great detail in the book, they were discriminated against, but they somehow adopted the narrative of the privileged segment of the population, which told them you are Jewish. And I also have a line that people liked to quote, and I put it also on the back of the book. After bringing all these Arab Jews, and at great expense in the 90s and the first years of the new millennium, Israel started exercise the mass import of non-Jews, because they were not Arabs. They were either Russians or Ethiopians, but they were not Arabs. So the common denominator for the new Israelis is that they're not Arabs, and the fear of Arab majority, etc. So let's go back to our days. Because the Nakba, the process of ethnic cleansing that I was just giving you a tiny local private look at it, is an ongoing process, and today it's simply mushrooming. Bedouins are being moved away from their settlements in the Negev. Jerusalem has got Silwan, Sheikh Jarrah, Ma'ale Adumim, Har Homa, you name it, all these neighborhoods, with just the state of Israel and its different establishments that just do everything to make Arab lives miserable or simply just evacuate them. The same happens also in the mixed cities like Acre and Jaffa. I live in Jaffa. We have settlers who come, buy houses around Jaffa, and become a nuisance to the area. And thanks to a court action some 5 years ago, they were not allowed to build a gated community where only Jews were allowed to buy property. So sometimes you can block them, but there is not enough of it. The Judaization of the Galilee, whatever, South Hebron, you read it. I mean, I know that you're activists, you're all interested in the Middle East, so I don't have to tell you what's happening on a daily basis. What I would like I always knew that Israel was doing things which I didn't agree with. My quest is to understand why Israeli Jews who are enlightened and liberal, why do they cooperate with it? Why don't they see the damage that it brings to Jewish society? Because it's not even nice to be a Jew in Israel. It's the most dangerous place for Jews in the world. I mean, it's much nicer to be a Jew in France or in the United States or in New Haven than to be a Jew in one of these settlers. When you say in Israel that you support a state for all its citizens, I mean, it's not rocket science. It's a very simple thing. Every state should be the state for all its citizens. But this word alone is pejorative in Israeli media. To say that somebody you just say, oh, it's all these human rights activists. Oh, human rights activists. It would be like saying, I don't know what the equivalent would be in this country. It was just calling somebody a name. You're one of these people. You are the miserable New Jewish Israel Fund, a Zionist leftist organization, gets so much flack. People tell me, because they don't understand anything in politics, they say, oh, you're like the New Israel Fund. And I say, no. I mean, I think they're right-wingers, they're Zionists. But still, the kind of animosity, the kind of hatred which is even allowed in public speech. A teacher that lost his job because he was talking about human rights, and one 16-year-old student started screaming at him, and he told her she doesn't know what she's talking about. He lost his job, not she was reprimanded. And the Minister of Education, which is supposed to be in a sort of a secular, enlightened center party, didn't do anything about it. So my claim is that the state of mind that the Israelis are in is simply engineered to them through mechanisms which have been perfected in 1500 or 2000 or 3000 years of Jewish orthodoxy. And I would just say, all religions are not suitable to run states. Well, we're here on something else now. Okay. Oh, this is a different subject. Okay. There is an extra a court case that I wanted to present to you. We did not win the right to call ourselves Israeli nationals, but the chairman of our association, Uzi Ornan, a professor of 91 years old, decided that he wants to change his status from a citizen by virtue of right of return to a citizen by virtue of residency. He was born in 1923 in Palestine, Israel. So why cannot he be a citizen by a right of residency? And we thought it would take another 15 years for the court to try and skirmish around this issue. Didn't take them even a month. They just decided, Mr. Ornan, you cannot change it. It was rejected. You are a citizen by right of return, even though you're 91 and you were a Palestinian in your ID, which he presented is a Palestinian British mandatory ID. And that was exactly a year ago, right? So what does it mean? It means that to be Jewish is not something which is given to you by free will. You cannot become Jewish by free will. Nobody can come to Israel. I have this example which I flipped over quickly. When you come to get your ID, you are asked what your nationality is. If you say you're Jewish, you have to produce papers and community registration that shows that your parents have been practicing or recognized as Jews. If you say anything else, you can say anything else. I was married to an Englishman who didn't want to say what his religion was, so he didn't want to say I'm a Christian, because to say I'm a Christian is something means something ideologically, because they wouldn't give him anything. So he said, okay, write down a Buddhist, and he's registered as a Buddhist. You can do that, but you cannot register as Jewish. But you can also, if you're Jewish, you suddenly cannot become a non-Jew. So there is no free will here. And I stress the point because democracy is about free will. It's about people choosing their identity. People talking about, there is a Jewish identity. Yes, but the Jewish identity is not something that we can make up for ourselves. So what does that mean for the self-determination of Jews? And self-determination is a very loaded word, because states say that they have a right to exist by virtue of self-determination. But if your citizens do not have the right of self-determination, if we can not determine ourselves, what does it mean that that your determination is by some rabbinical authority which is authorized by the state, financed by the state, and they are the ones who consider what kind of nationality you have, what privileges you are. So I think Israel, when it argues for self-determination and all this two-state talk, should be rethought along the lines of what does it mean to be a Jew in Israel? What does it mean to be a Jewish state if this is really a religious, and it's not even a religion that you can take. I can become, it's a very special case, the Jewish religion. I can become a Muslim tomorrow by saying, no, Allah without Allah and Muhammad Rasul Allah. But I cannot, and I can become a Christian if I'll get baptized. But you cannot become Jewish unless you go through a terrible ordeal of learning, etc. It is a very controversial. Even today, I was told by my aunt and uncle who are really almost orthodox, but they were horrified to see on Israeli television this week a rabbi telling a secular interviewee he was being nasty or discriminated against a converted, a woman, a very religious converted woman. And he admitted that he prefers a secular-born Jew to a convert, even though the convert is very, very religious and observing. So he just said it on Israeli television. It's not me. Okay. Okay. Next to the right of self-determination, the Jewish Israeli says we also have a right to Jewish collective rights. So please consider what kind of collective we have. It is a collective that is not a voluntary collective. You cannot belong to it by free will, as I said. You cannot belong through marriage. You cannot be, not even by birth and education. There are people who have been born like workers or non-Jews who were born in this country. No, they can never be accepted into the sort of recognized nationality, the canonized nationality of the state by birth or by education, and they can go to the Israeli army and they'd still be considered goys. So I think it's, I don't have to waste a lot of time talking about what it means to be Jewish and democratic, which doesn't mean you cannot be a Jew and a democratic person, or a Muslim and democratic, but I don't think a political entity which has an army can adhere to a specific God. And you know that in the last Gaza war, one of the generals of the army issued the order of the day, which was really a religious tract. People argued against it, and lots of criticism, and Haaretz, which is read by 5% of the educated population, was very much against it, but he's a general and he will be promoted, and one day he will be chief of staff and maybe he'll be prime minister. Okay? Because once you get any religion into the legislation, human rights and civil liberties are out. That's the first thing any religion does, and of course women are mostly the first to notice. And I admit that I noticed my grudge against the Jewish religion started when I was 16, and I discovered that if I married my boyfriend...
The library will be closing in 5 minutes.
Oh.
That doesn't matter.
Okay. Then I discovered that I will not... Okay. Right. Hi. We can stay if we choose. So I discovered that if I ever get married, immediately my status is inferior to that of my husband. And this is why Israel can never pass even a constitution, not because of the Arab-Israeli situation, because of the female-male situation. We just cannot say that everybody is equal by the law, because we're not. And as you know, religion is a very easy and efficient tool for discrimination. All you have to say is that somebody is not... So my only plea in this book is for the separation of state and church, and to say, listen, we want a state which does not brand according to the religion. And my main argument is with people who put a lot of pressure on territories. Let us withdraw from the territories, the occupied territories. But it is all the territory which is handled that way. Okay, I lived in Ramat Aviv, in Tel Aviv. It was once an Arab village, so it's also, we're also settlers there. The question is the principle. The question, Israel. The problem with Israel is not territory. The state is already one state anyway. The question is people. The question is how do you deal with the people who live in this country? And this is something that people don't like to hear. This is where I cannot have this talk without talking about something about the status of the Palestinians in the occupied territories. So we already established that the principle is clear. The non-Jews are considered a demographic hazard, so they get more and more restrictions and limitations. Securing the Jewish state is the highest priority of the state, and we do it through these ideas. Besides these major distinctions between Jews and non-Jews, the state is constantly working on, because it's also practical. So Druze, Christians, Bedouins get special positions if they cooperate with the army, if they would like to serve or to be more friendly to the Zionist establishments. The last thing is just a month ago they decided there is a new nationality, Azura. Azura is something from Syria, it's an obscure religion, just to give this group, which probably came from Lebanon and was maybe in the South Lebanese army, and we want to give them some more subsidies, so we give them a special studies. So you see how the bureaucracy is already building. Once you have an establishment that you are allowed to see people as not equal, then you can go on forever, and you do. And then you go and then you occupy new territories of people who are not even Israeli citizens. Until now, we just spoke about Israeli citizens. So what happens when you're not Israeli citizen, but you're still an Israeli subject? You are stateless, but your sovereign is the Israeli state. So you get degrees. You hold an ID, like my ID, and every Palestinian has an ID issued by the Israeli Ministry of the Interior. And if you're a resident of East Jerusalem, you can vote for the city council, you can drive all over the country, because Jerusalem was annexed, so was the Golan, so it brings with itself some privileges, right? So lots of people who cannot afford to live in East Jerusalem, they work or study in Ramallah, they have to keep their residency in East Jerusalem, or they will lose lots of privileges. And then comes Area C, Area B, Area A, and we all know that Area C is where the settlers are allowed to live. Area B is supposed to be mixed. Area A is Palestinian, right? This is the Palestinian autonomy. Guess what? I found it really on the ground. I went to buy a Palestinian phone, a Jawal, that works better. Said, ID, please. I said, what do you mean ID? My ID is an Israeli ID. Yes, that's it. Apparently, all their IDs are the same, and they all report about everybody who buys a phone to the Israeli authorities. And the same, you might not know about it, I was surprised too, I researched it, Gaza Strip population. Didn't we leave the Gaza Strip? How many times did you hear Israelis say, we withdrew? There was separation, we left Gaza. We left Gaza, we didn't leave the Gaza residents. They still carry the Hawiyah, the Israeli Hawiyah. I know people are there any Palestinians here in the room? I don't know. I have Palestinian friends. They live in Germany for years. They want to come and visit their family. They have to show their Hawiyah. The wife has got to get another Hawiyah. That is an ID printed in Hebrew and Arabic for the benefit of the Israeli state. So during the last, this is the Hawiyah, the last Gaza war, didn't you hear how benevolent the Israeli army was, sending SMS messages for people whose houses is about to be bombed? What does it mean? It's their own subject. What is it? What difference does it make with you talk about the Syrian government bombing your own subjects? It is not another land fighting you. It's your own citizen rising up for their rights, and you're bombing them like they were enemy, but at the same time you keep their identity in your own registration because they're your own, they're your people. And you're